To strengthen the battle against money laundering in Nigeria, the Central Bank of Nigeria has directed that all bank customers must link their bank verification number and or the national identification number with their bank accounts before March 1, 2024. And this came after the Financial Action Task Force plenary held late October in Paris, France, saying that Nigeria failed to scale a review of money laundering and terrorism financing risk conducted by the Global Financial Intelligence Agency. Now, the global agency faulted Nigeria's anti-money laundering war since being grey-listed alongside 20 other countries in February. This renewed call for strict BVN and NIN compliance is in a bid to get Nigeria off the grey list. So from Paris in France, I have Esteban Guidici, Senior Policy Advisor, Transnational Alliance to Combat Illicit Trade. Thank you so much, Esteban, for talking to us.
No, thank you, Lekan. It's always a pleasure to discuss these matters with you.
All right. Now, a typical question in a Nigerian would ask is that since the advent of the bank verification number on February 14, 2014 and the national identification number January 9, 2014, what has been the difference? What has those particular initiatives, what have they really achieved? What about banks in terms of fraud-related cases? Have they reduced? What are the issues with this illicit trade or illicit financial flows that has been perpetrated within Nigeria's financial institution? I'd like to know your take on this.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's very good for understanding why Nigeria was put in the enhanced list of the Financial Action Task Force back on February 2023 at the beginning of this year. I mean, the FATF, the Financial Action Task Force, recognizes that Nigeria has done some improvement in terms of legislation. But the problems that the country has faced, according to this watchdog that is based here in Paris and also working with the regional body that is in Africa that assists these institutions to come up to these conclusions and to issue the recommendations, and to monitor what's going on in Nigeria, the problem has to do a lot with the effectiveness of these laws and policies. And one very important aspect is everything that has to do with the risk-based assessment, meaning that all stakeholders in the financial system, and especially financial institutions as banks, need to implement these Know Your Customer measures. It's a way of understanding with whom you're doing business, and it's a way of preventing money laundering and preventing financing of terrorism. Why? Because criminals, money launderers, people who are in this kind of criminal schemes, they are very intelligent and they know how to find the loopholes, how to find the tricks, how to find the backdoors to funnel illicit flows, illicit financial flows into regular economies, to launder them, and to use them for different criminal activities. I mean, at the end of the day, where there is big criminality, there is always money laundering, because that money needs to be laundered to be able to funnel it into the regular economy. And that's why these kind of measures, they are very important for Nigeria. What has improved? Well, this needs to be tightened, and that's why we have today this new measure that is taken by the central bank. And it needs to be applied by the beginning of March 2024, and this is going to demand lots of work and effort from all people working for the bank and all entities that are related to this.
Now, when we look at countries like this who are on the FATF grey list, you begin to wonder how they will be able to transact with other partners, how they'll be able to attract investments, how they'll be able to draw key stakeholders into their economy to improve their economy. But then when we have inhibitors like anti-money laundering charges and terrorist financing, proliferation of financing regimes leveled against them, now how does it, to some extent or to a large extent, affect probable business ventures who might want to have some sort of association with these countries?
Well, this is very important, I think, for everyone, for the society, to understand that fighting the financial flows, it's going to improve the economic prospects. I always mention the number that the International Monetary Fund has talked about the 7% of loss in terms of foreign investments in countries that are subject to the gray list of the Financial Action Task Force. I mean, from the Transnational Alliance to Combat Illicit Trade, we are always trying to help member states to fight these problems, because the economic prospects, they go hand by hand with criminality. I mean, when they become worse economic prospects. We have seen this in many different countries. We have done these assessments in Turkey, in South Africa, and now in Nigeria. What's the common thread that we see behind all these problems with criminality? Is rampant inflation. In Nigeria, it's around 20%. This is something that needs to be tackled. And there is a really bad tendency and let's say, a vicious circle between criminality, inflation, illicit financial flows, illicit trade. I mean, okay, it's the chicken and the egg, what happened first. But what's important is to tighten out all these controls. And certainly, complying with the Financial Action Task Force recommendations and doing what's being asked to improve, as Nigeria is doing it now, it's going to improve the economic prospects. It's going to take some time, but it's going to help to curb inflation. And at the end of the day, this is going to be better for the most vulnerable parts of the society. So this is a little bit the leitmotif of the recommendations that we try to put forward from Traceit. I mean, Nigeria, it's an amazing country. It's one of the youngest countries in the world, has over 200 million people. It's growing. And it's forecasted that the growth is going to be 3%. And it's important to take this momentum to have a healthy economy and to have a healthy growth of the economy in Nigeria to improve the quality of life of all inhabitants in the country.
Well, of course, Esteban, Nigeria is actually seen as a high-risk country for anti-corruption and other financial crimes because of these allegations that has been leveled against the country. But then if we look at the different regulatory bodies that we have in the country, we have the Special Control Unit against Money Laundering, Security and Exchange Commission. Of course, we have the CBN, we have the Corporate Affairs Commission and some other regulatory bodies. But then we still see that Nigeria has not been able to get out of that bottle. And of course, we have seen the Nigerian president move around several countries trying to woo investors. But then when we look at these impediments, these would-be investors would definitely not want to put their money in the Nigerian economy. So how do you think that the Nigerian government can actually scale up the operations of these regulatory bodies in terms of monitoring, management, and of course, regulating the financial activities in Nigeria to help achieve these reforms that the Nigerian government has put on board in tandem with what the FATF is also hoping that the Nigerian government will do?
Okay, yeah, there are many things that can be done. And I think that something important to do with Nigeria is to see good things that have been done and some entities that do good work in Nigeria. For instance, I remember being in a meeting of the OECD, which is the organization here at Paris, that is the umbrella organization for the FATF, and it's also for the most developed countries in the world, if you want, in terms of their economy. I remember in an illicit trade task force, one of the good practices that was brought from Nigeria was the work of the National Agency for Food and Drug Administration and Control, the NAFDAC. And they do great work in terms of combating illicit trade and criminality in this sense. Now, yes, you mentioned corruption, you mentioned organized crime, there is financing of terrorism. We have reports on this, which are related to illicit financial flows and illicit trade in different kind of sectors, like it can be tobacco, alcohol, and other types of criminality. But well, it's an effervescent country. These things happen. It's not the only country that has this problem, but I think that on the top of what you said, of looking for investments, of complying with the FATF, it's also important to use other international standards, other tools, like it can be the United Nations Convention Against Crime and Corruption. If the government seeks technical assistance from the United Nations Office for Drug and Crime, that's going to be deployed. I understand that this is going on in certain ways, for instance, to fight pharmaceuticals. And another way to do this is also trying to use all the tools and resources that the Palermo Convention has. It's a convention against transnational organized crime. And I think my opinion is that it's very important for Nigeria to tackle the effectiveness of the recommendations of the Financial Action Task Force. What does this mean? Well, it needs to have more investigations in terms of money laundering, more requests for mutual legal assistance from countries, because this kind of crime is utterly transnational. I mean, the money laundering schemes, they are done through different nations. And of course, from Traceit, we remain available to work on this. I mean, it's huge, the labor that needs to be done. But at the same time, it's going to pay, because little effort, I mean, lots of effort may have little impact in the way that we solve things, but for sure, this is going to improve the quality of life of people there. And this is a little bit the general ideas that we see. They have worked in different countries. For instance, I can bring examples from Central America, where these things were done in specific sectors. And the economic reboost was quite fast. So we have to have hope on these measures that the government is taking, and include all others that we just mentioned.
Okay. Esteban Guidici, Senior Policy Advisor, Transnational Alliance to Combat Illicit Trade. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Lekan. Have a nice day.
And you too.